Hello, have you heard of the new grazing technique for managing pastures and livestock? I'm sure you or someone you know raises some sort of livestock. Me and my family currently run about 400 head of cattle in east central Missouri, and we use rotational grazing whenever possible instead of the conventional grazing system. Rotational grazing is a great alternative to traditional grazing because it takes some of the stress off the grass and soil in the pasture. Rotational grazing is the process of rotating cattle more quickly through smaller pastures, thus keeping the cattle off already grazed pasture. One of the most important steps to rotational grazing is for the farmer to rotate cattle quickly through the pastures. Pastures should not be allowed to be grazed down to bare dirt. Livestock should be rotated regularly to prevent overgrazing and optimize the grass growth. On our farm, we try to keep our cattle out of our ponds by using automatic waters that flow from a pond or a well instead of allowing them to enter the pond. This keeps them from walking on the ice in the colder months and from destroying the pond in the summer months. We make this process simpler by creating a pen around the water or a pond if a water is not available. Then we create multiple pastures that stem off of this pen and allow us to change pastures without completely relocating most of the time, the herd most of the time. Once pastures have been grazed down, then you should not allow the livestock back on that pasture. Grazed pastures should be left to grow back to its fully grown state before the livestock should be allowed to regraze it. Again, if you put small pens or lots around the water, like we have, then you can easily prevent this. Pastures that have been grazed should rest for about a month, depending on grass growth and weather. We usually let ours sit idle until we graze all the nearby pastures and then return the cattle to the original first grazed pasture. Dividing pastures into smaller chunks is a vital part of rotational grazing. Pastures must be relatively small for this system to work effectively. Most people use polywire fencing to divide their larger pastures into smaller pieces. We do use this polywire fencing from a central watering pen that I mentioned earlier to the exterior edge of the larger pastures to divide it into smaller pieces. By following these steps, you will have happier and healthier livestock and pastures. In conclusion, rotational grazing involves dividing pastures into smaller chunks, keeping cattle off already grazed pasture, and moving livestock before all the grass has been eaten.